Hello? Hi. Yeah, yes, this is Jeroen speaking. Jeroen Appel, yeah. Yeah, I'm the new DevOps engineer. Yes. How can I help you? You're getting an error. And what does it say? Please contact your admin. Oh, that's me. Yeah. So, well, let's see. I'm just working here for 2 weeks now, so hopefully we can find a call soon. We are using over 10 Mendix applications currently. So, where are you trying to add the client specifically? You're using the app every day, yeah? That's not that important. The blue one, yeah, a bit more specific. What's the name of the current page? When you look on the top of your browser, then what does it tell? CRM, that's great. Then thanks. I will have a look at the logs now. So let's see. Yes. Wait a moment. Just today, right? Yeah, okay. Oh, that's a big one. One moment. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, thank you for waiting. I will just have a look if I see something. Oh, well, a bit over 4,000 errors just this day. That's a bit hard to distinguish your error. At what time did it happen? Can you remember that? Around 4, that's great, thanks. I can see something. Het was. One moment. I can read there something went wrong, but I'm not sure what. Let's look it up. Oh. It was not possible to send the customer. So yeah, what I can see now is that something went wrong when you were adding that customer. Is that right? Yeah, that was right. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, no. Okay. Yeah. I will now go into my IDE now and see. Oh, that's creative. I must say so. Yeah, not sure what's happening here, but I think I found what. It's a bit of a strange pattern, but I think I know where it went wrong. You were sending a message to the portfolio app when you were adding that customer in CRM. So I need to have a look at that application to see what went wrong. But give me a moment. I will just go in and then go to the other application. So the portfolio app. Oh, this one again. Yeah. All right. So. Yeah, when looking through the logs, I cannot find a match based on the customer number. So let's see if I can find something around the same time. One moment. Oh, I found it, but this is showing a customer's name. It's Peter Pan. Is that correct? Correct. Correct? Yes. Yes? Awesome. Then I think we found the issue. I see that you've added a phone number, and that's a bit too long. Yeah, so you should be able to add it if you just add a shorter number. Yeah, and this is of course not right, so we will create a ticket for you. We will come back at you. Yeah? Yeah, no problem. Tomorrow it will be fixed maybe, or the next sprint, could be. Yeah? Awesome. Anything else? No? No? Okay. You too. Bye-bye. So, I'm sorry. Well, welcome everyone. I was a bit bothered by an incoming call, as you noticed. But welcome at the very first Mendix Meetup in our new office in Amersfoort here. We're in the, how we call it, the prenatal attic, as you might have seen on the door. So it's good to have you all here. Today we will tell you anything about logging, monitoring in general, and a lot to come. And I will present that together with Owen. He's joining us as well from Datadog, and I will introduce him as soon as I give over the presenter. Yeah, let's start. First, a small question. Who of you is using just one Mendix application currently? So maybe maintaining or having it in production, just one. All right. Who is maintaining or deploying multiple applications currently? Mendix applications. That's a lot. Awesome. And then maybe some in the Mendix Cloud currently? Mendix Cloud users? I think 3/4. And on-premise, private cloud. Yeah, also a few. Awesome. Okay. And then the final question, is there someone who's already using an APM tool to... Siri is not using it. Let's jump into the agenda. Thank you very much. We'll just cover a few topics really briefly. What I will try to do is just throw a lot of information at you. And that's mainly due to the things I learned from colleagues, learned from previous projects. And hopefully there's something to take with you for everyone. If you have questions during the presentation, if they are just there to clarify something, please raise your hand and ask. And otherwise, please store them for the end of the presentation, then we can collect them there. So let's go. So first the when. When will you log? So an interface is a quite common way to log. It's the first step where you think, well, maybe something can go wrong, so I want to be notified about that. So one of the important things here is that there might be something in that error. So what you can see is, for example, in the call you had that something went wrong while posting that customer. What went wrong? Please tell me. You need to have those entities available. So your latest HTTP, I can see the audience. I don't think that this is new to anyone, but you see that it's quite common to forget something like that. So the details which are in that interface, that they are not added to that log message. We will come to that later. Custom Java. When you're using custom Java actions in your application, either because you develop them yourself or because you download them from the marketplace, a lot can go wrong in those actions. And it's a bit, it's not totally right to say, well, when something goes wrong, it will throw an error. Maybe the implementation of the Java action is a bit different, so that the output will be a false, for example. And that's the same thing as an error in that case. And it will depend from marketplace to marketplace module. Of course, there are best practices, and you mostly see that it will throw a clear error, which you can do something with. But it's good to invest that or investigate that before you start using that in your application. So know what the expected behavior is of the Java actions you're actually using. All right. Then another question, will you only log errors? Or are there more? We all know, or I think most of us know, that we have our 5 log levels, which are available in Studio Pro. And they're all there, they're free to use. And I can see that the most used one is still the error. But there are scenarios in which it's also very helpful to have that info post. So for example, when you're using an interface, is it only interesting to know when it's going wrong, or is it also interesting to know when it went well? And especially, did it went well, when did it went well for the last time as soon as an error occurs? Also to do some kind of trend analysis. How is the usage of that API? Am I hitting some rate limits or something like that? It can be really interesting to log that as well. One of the things I want to give with you is that there is also a learning path in the Mendix Academy available, and it's also guiding you towards when to use a warning, when to use an info message, when to use an error. And it's good to have such a discussion with your team if you haven't already, because otherwise it's quite likely that everyone will do something just on their own guess, on their own insights, and it's good to have a common understanding of when to log what, so you know what to expect. Then there are log notes, something I see quite often in really old projects and existing projects. The current best practice communicated by Mendix is to use an enumeration in which you store all your log notes. So every developer in the project is aware of the existing log notes and is aware of which to use. Too often I still see people just putting something in there as a string, and that often causes scenarios like we have 3 log nodes for the same purpose. And then it's really hard to track the exact behavior of your application. Some marketplace modules come with a constant with a log node. If that's available, use that. A bit of an open door, but it's good to have some common understanding, preferably within your app landscape, but at least in your single app. Well, and what would you add to such an error message? Sometimes it's just what went wrong. So you have, as you can see here, you have your, it's a bit small, but you have your latest HTTP response with some content, a reason, a status code, things which are relevant to an interface. But sometimes you also have something that's needed to relate it back to your business process. When you're developing a feature, you're totally sucked into it. So you know everything from the top of your mind. But you must imagine yourself like a year later, or maybe a colleague a year later. And what does that colleague need when something went wrong to really see what went wrong? And that's the data you need to add to such a message. So you can think about that up front. And one of the things I will come back to is that identifier, but that's for later. This is for a Java action I created, I think, a few years ago, and I think there are many more of them going around. But I think it's really helpful when you are working with interfaces or other actions which are used on multiple places. So I've seen examples when there was hard-coded in the error message, something went wrong in ACT underscore something else underscore commit. But then that action was being copied over and over and over again, and it was telling over and over and over again that it was happening on that same place, and it wasn't. So therefore, it's really helpful to have such an action, or I find it really helpful to have the exact microflow name of that current execution available. So if it changes, if you change it for whatever reason, then the action will fetch the correct name. So that's something that helped me a lot. Then we have the language. I still see, and that was in the example as well, so I still find Dutch log rules in between English log rules. And then I think, well, we're not there anymore. I think it's good to have a common understanding that your language of preference is most likely English, and otherwise it might be Dutch, but then everything Dutch or everything English, preferably English. But yeah, I still see it happening. And then the identifier, and this is also something that's people can get creative with it. If you have, for example, an order not always starts from the order. Sometimes there will be a quote in front of it. When will it get that identifier that it's being an order? So what I've seen happening is that something is having an identifier like the quote ID, and it transferred towards an order ID. But because it's changing the identifier, it's really hard to trace that message, that order or that thing that you want to track it, because it's having multiple identifiers. And it's easy to overlook that. So having an understanding of what's your identifier, what's the thing you want to follow, it's good to do that upfront as well, or have an understanding within your multiple apps or your chain, or within your single app. Yeah, I call this slide one way. It's something I see in several projects as well, and it might work for you if you have a quite single-purpose application, so it's doing one thing really well. Then you might be, or you might want to have a default way of processing your logs. So what you then can create is so-called log microflow with just multiple parameters. So you don't need to rethink that details page over and over again. And that colleague is adding a space, that colleague is leaving out the customer ID, that person is putting in a line of 500 characters. And if you want to limit that, then you could use such a microflow. And eventually that will look something like this. And that could be totally up to your use case, your application, but it might be helpful. You could also decide to store something in the database, for example, on which I come back later. But having it one way is a way to have it traceable. Now, what not? And that's sensitive data. I see this happening a lot as well. Then you have your entity access set up correct. You have your entire app is secure. It feels right, and you only have a few users which can really go to the core data, and then you have your logging. And then in your logging, there's all the phone numbers and the email addresses and everything in there. It's just there. And who is able to access those logs? All your developers who also have access to Sprinter. So it's something to think about. You can tell. Because I do this or I don't know it, it's not there. When you put it in the log, it's also somewhere. So it's good to have an understanding of that. And one of the things I wanted to highlight here, and you see that on the screen already, is that Mendix moved towards an approach in which they redact the email, for example. So they will never log passwords or email addresses from the user. And they're doing that by default already. But if you're logging yourself, then it's something to be aware of. So then where can we log? So we have a few places where we can logs. And of course, we have our default Mendix logging. That's the text file I just showed and the live log. I think everyone is familiar with that. So we will move on to the subscription to alerts. So if something really goes wrong, that could be a critical, for example, then you can be notified via email. I've seen some extensive approaches on this with an email box, just listening to those alert emails and doing something with that. That might be a way. And we have webhooks, and those can be extended to the alerts. So I've also heard customers adding like a Slack channel which is posting the alerts from that specific environment. It could be anything which you log or which you set up in Mendix, and you can do something with that. Not everything, but especially with criticals and things like metrics for your database. Most generic things, you can use this as a solution as well. You could also log in app. So I think the logging module is one of the, this was a screenshot of today. It's downloaded over 5,000 times. So a lot of Mendix applications currently have this module in their app. What you're then doing is storing your logs in your database. Again, then you need to think about access, who is accessing those logs, but you also need to think about cleaning them up. I've seen apps going down because of the logging module because they didn't clean it up. Your database can grow over time, and is that really the place where you want it? So logging about an app in the same app, it's something to consider. For some apps, it might be sufficient, but I think for most there is another alternative. And about those alternatives, it's also possible to connect an APM tool to Mendix. And they are adding more and more tools every few mons, I see. But one of the first was Datadog, and you can see that in the right upper corner. And over the last few years, I've experienced it very helpful at multiple customers. So I thought, well, that might be a great topic for a meetup to show you the power of such a tool. So that's the point where I want to give over the wand to Owen. So give it up for our guest.
And I have just disconnected myself from the Wi-Fi, so lovely. Let's just get back on. Jeroen, did I break something? Is it working? Nope. Just give me 1 second. It's on mirror, and I will fix that. Okay, there we go. I swear Apple just changed their entire layout. Okay, so my name is Owen Phelan, and I am a solution engineer at Datadog. Just out of curiosity, was anyone at the AWS Summit today? We have 1, 2, 3. Well done, champions, for dealing with all of that and then still getting on the train and coming out here. But one of the reasons I really wanted to come out today is Mendix, especially in the Netherlands, is huge. And they actually, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say, but we've worked with Mendix extensively. They use Datadog. And so do a lot of the Mendix customers. And the reason is because the demands on your software development teams and your IT teams are kind of crazy today. When you think about the pace of change in IT in the last 10 years, I looked, Kubernetes came out in 2014, its first release. It's not even 10 years old. And it has entirely kind of recreated the face of microservices and how we deploy. We have everyone going to the cloud. You're using Kubernetes, you're using serverless, you have hybrid, you have multi-cloud. We need to care about DevSecOps, even though most people are only 25% of the way to DevOps. The pace of change is insane. And when we think about observability, the complexity, like a metaphor I like to think of is an airplane. You think about the first airplane, it had 2 dials. Is my engine running, and how much gas do I have? And that's basically, the Marx Brothers, that's what they cared about, those 2. And now you think about airplanes today, and you have Bluetooth, 6 engines, landing gears, altitude, pressure, temperature. There's 1,000 different sources of data, and you have to go to school for like 10 years to become a pilot and actually figure out, okay, is the plane flying? And the same thing is happening when you think about observability, especially when people are coming from on-prem or they're using open source. When something goes wrong, they think to themselves, okay, it could be my Mendix app, it could be the cloud I'm hosting it on, it could be my on-premise, it could be a network switch went off, it could be a security, someone could be DDoSing me, and it becomes, when you think about being in observability, you have basically a war room that looks like this. And it becomes really hard to figure out when the plane is crashing, what is actually going wrong? Because you have way too many sources of data. And to be honest, there's always, we call them at Datadog the Gandalfs, but there's always the people who have been there for 10 years and kind of understand the system in the same way a horse whisperer understands a horse. They kind of lay their hands on it and into it, but not everyone's going to be like that. We don't know who our pilots are going to be. So the whole Datadog idea was, okay, how do we make a platform for people who are using solutions like Mendix and are in the cloud and are on-prem and have all these solutions? How do we build something that makes even the least experienced or the newest people to the team able to figure out, okay, is the plane flying? Are we doing okay? And basically, the idea is, okay, let's make that dashboard of the future. And this is super marketing-y, and I know that, and I'm gonna make it more concrete in a second. But it's basically this idea of, okay, what is the next cockpit? It's integrated. It's instead of having 1,000 different dials, 1,000 different sources of data, one for your logs, one from your metrics, one from your traces, one for your Mendix information, one for your cloud information, and everybody kind of yelling at each other, have one integrated source of truth. So that's where Datadog started. And to be honest, to cut through the marketing crap, that's what we are, is we're a data platform for observability data. And so what data are we talking about? What do you need? Well, the idea is, if we think about, this is the Google's SRE pyramid of needs. If you think about kind of the needs in order to run an application, they put at the foundation monitoring, incident response, postmortems, which is kind of ironic because that is the least valuable work your developers can do. We are paying them to focus up here. We want them to be building our product, developing our product, capacity planning, testing and releasing. This is where their focus should be. The less work they can do on these foundations, the better. So the whole idea, and to be honest, I'm talking Datadog, but basically any observability solution, the idea is, how can we take care of this for you and push your developers up here? And honestly, that's the same with Mendix. Mendix is there saying, how can we get rid of, make this as uncumbersome as possible and actually focus on rolling out a new product? That's the whole idea. And so the way Datadog does that is with data. And we start with your back-end data first, where we have, this is what we kind of came up with, this idea of the 3 pillars of observability. It's metrics, ignore the infrastructure, traces, and logs. And we start with metrics. Metrics is, okay, what are my systems running on? And not just what is the CPU and what is the memory, but part of the DevOps mentality is allow your developers to use whatever they want. So they want to use Redis, go for it. They want to use Mongo, go for it. They want to use SQL, go for it. And the issue there is you end up with a Redis and a Mongo and a SQL in your stack, and you start to think about, okay, how do I measure this? What are the metrics that I need to actually monitor for all these different solutions? I have Kafka and RabbitMQ, and how do I actually know what to monitor? So pulling in metric information and alerting on all of it. Distributed tracing. This is specifically for non-monolithic. This is, you think about, okay, if somebody on my front end, one of my customers, whether it's internal or external, they come and they say, okay, I'm trying to log in, and they're not able to. That login request, it hits a web server, it hits a load balancer, it hits a data store, it hits an authentication server, there's so many different services that could fail to stop that. So root cause analysis becomes much harder than it was in the old days, where it was literally, hey, have you turned it off and back on again? It's like, no, I now have 15 different systems that it's touching. So we need to be able to have tracing. And finally, we need to be able to have logs. And this is especially for SaaS providers. Oftentimes, this is the only visibility we get, because they're not going to show us what the CPU is of the infrastructure it's running on. They're not going to show us the APM. They're just going to give us this logging diagnostic data. So there's a lot of solutions out there. I mean, I'm sure all of you have run into Elk. Splunk is a big competitor. There's a lot of stuff. But the real value for logs is, how do we put that data in context? Because logs contain the sources of truth. We know that. They're the easiest way to troubleshoot. The issue is, if I say, oh, I'm having an issue, show me my logs for the last 4 hours, usually the system is like, great, here's 27 million logs. And I have to figure out where to find the needle in one of 15 haystacks, basically. So it becomes really, really difficult. This is where Datadog started. And we started in cloud, Kubernetes, and serverless specifically, but we've kind of expanded beyond, because obviously, as much as we say the whole world is moving to cloud and serverless, we all have on-prem things, that we hide in the closet, but they're still there, and it's going to be a while till they're gone. So then we said, all right, what's the next logical step? And this is a big kind of DevOps principle, is the user experience. Where when we think about alerting and waking up our on-call engineers, unless the user experience is suffering, we don't need to wake them up. If they're able to log on quickly and successfully, if they're able to achieve those kind of critical user journeys, then the data center can be fully on fire. We don't care. As that's what we actually care about. So we said, okay, how do we add that measuring the user experience and connecting it to all this data? And then how can we use synthetics to test those experiences so we're not waiting for users to tell us, we're actually able to see ahead of time, oh, I tried to log in once a minute and it's been working, nope, something broke. We can immediately jump on top of it. And then we said, all right, we still have a lot of people who are on-prem and they care about network flows, or maybe even in cloud, they care about data being able to transfer between Kubernetes clusters, or maybe they have network devices. We saw F5 at the AWS Summit today. They're still big in the game, these firewalls and switches and stuff. Maybe we need to have that observability. For cloud, we started to bring in security. Now, if you have a massive SOC team that's been doing security for 15 years, the chance that you're going to convince them to do anything, let alone go to Datadog, very small. I think we've all had experience with security teams. But if you're new to cloud and you're trying to make sure that, hey, GDPR, SOC, PCI, these are some general kind of, I need to know if someone is DDoSing me or if someone is trying to do a SQL injection attempt, and I don't have enough money to hire a 30-person security team. Well, you have all the data there. You know what's happening in your system. You have the logs. You have the traces. Why not add security on top? And just say, hey, I know when people are pinging this endpoint. If someone pings it 1,000 times, that's a DDoS. Actually add that layer of understanding. And finally, this is where our biggest kind of shift is right now, because all of this, when we think of DevOps, all of this is kind of closer to the ops side. It's the how are my systems performing in production? How are we actually doing? Finally, the shift left is, okay, let's start to get the developers involved. The pipeline visibility. How is my CI/CD? How is my testing suite? When I think about things like DORA metrics, over here I'm able to see when deployments hit production and what their failure rate is, but when did those actually commit? You can't improve something you don't measure. So how do I bring in deployment frequency, failure rate, time to change, things like that? And then finally, and I'll be honest, this is I think a good thing, we're not primarily an incident management solution. We don't do on-call rotations. That's not what we're here for. All of you have systems in place in your own businesses, whether it's just an email, or whether it's Slack, or whether it's Teams, or PagerDuty, or ServiceNow, or OpsGenie, or whatever it is. And with Datadog, you can take all this data, alert on it, and then send those pages out to whatever system you need to. So this is all the data. And we're adding more and more every single day, and it can be overwhelming. But the idea is, how do we pull this data together to actually make it valuable? Instead of having a cockpit with a million lights blinking, how can we actually allow you to quickly say, oh, my user's having an issue, how do I track that? And the way we do it is basically with tagging. Our first 2 years, we didn't have any products. The only thing we worked on was the data platform and the tagging strategy. And I'll show you basically what our image of how that should work when you're doing troubleshooting is, whether it's with Mendix or any of the solutions you're using in your stack. So Datadog has a web shop or an e-commerce shop that we maintain called Couch Cash. You cannot actually buy anything on this, thank God. That would be a whole other thing for us to deal with. But it's an actual e-commerce site. I can come, I can look at the specific areas. I can say, oh, I'm trying to get garden furniture. I'm going to get a wicker chair, add this to cart. And then if I go to my cart, I can go and check out. And shiftily, it doesn't ask for any kind of a thing. But to me, that seems like it's been successful. This is what our entire demo system is based on, this e-commerce shop. So we chose e-commerce because it's easy to understand what's critical there. Checking out, adding a credit card, logging in, product recommendations. These are the things that any e-commerce site needs. But you can think about the apps you guys are providing to your customers. Whether those are internal services or whether it's external customers who are actually interacting with your application or your web shop, you know what those critical journeys to monitor are. So first of all, if I'm an SRE or I'm a DevOps engineer and I log in, the first thing I care about when I look at my Couch Cache is these business metrics. That's what my SLOs are sent against. That's what my alerts are sent against. Specifically for me, checkout failures. Because as long as my users are able to log on, pay for things, and check out, I don't care about any of the other data. But I can see here, oh, there are checkouts that are failing. And if I go down, I can see, okay, I'm measuring latency for the different API endpoints. I'm seeing cart abandonments. I'm seeing checkout failures, checkout successes. These are business KPIs. But I also then have APM information. I have latency and checkout duration. I have what the load is by cluster. I have infrastructure information. Maybe it's Kubernetes, or maybe it's servers or VMs that I'm running in the cloud or on-prem. I have disk consumption. In this case, we're using Mongo. How much Mongo data is left? I have the different logs that are coming in, whether they be info or error logs for this specific service. I have serverless information. I have synthetic information. I have real user monitoring, where I'm seeing what they're doing on the front end, on their path from sofas to checkout. I have network performance information. I have 57, did I do the math right? No, 56 different monitors associated with this one service. Now, to be clear, this is a terrible dashboard. This is the exact same problem we were talking about. It's way too much data. How can you possibly log in and be like, oh, there's an issue, let me just... it's too much data. That's not what Datadog envisions. Instead, we say, okay, you've been woken up because we're starting to slip against our error budget. We can see that there are checkouts failing. If I go and I look at the last 4 hours, it seems like there's this huge spike. If I go back maybe like a day or 2 days, I'll do a day, I can see that every single hour there's a spike in checkouts failing. And this has been happening for a while. In fact, if I do a seasonal forecast on this, it's actually saying this has been happening for so long that based on the machine learning algorithms, I put that in quotes because it's such a marketing term, but we all know the algorithms are out there. They're not hard to do. It's just about the data that we feed into it. Since we have access to all this data, we can say, okay, this is going to continue. So I'm an SRE. We are losing money every second. And my job is, okay, it's time. We're going to do root cause analysis. The first thing I can do is say, okay, show me the front end. Show me what my users are actually experiencing. And this is the first time you guys are seeing tags. We're using the view name and the checkout and the specific application tag. Now I'm looking at users who tried to check out and weren't able to. And for each of these users, I can see, okay, what did they actually do? What did they click on? What loads did they view? What errors did they experience? And if you're a front-end developer, you probably understand what this means. If you're not, this, you don't know the flow of your front end. It's kind of hard. So we actually also do a replay where I can say, literally, show me what my user did as they clicked around my front end. And you can see those clicks. And I want to be clear here. We are not recording their screen. I demo this all the time. And I would say the most common reaction I get is, creepy. We're not recording. Basically, since we have those actions that they're clicking on, and we have access to what your front-end HTML is, or your iOS or your Android app, we're able to reconstruct that. So for me as a front-end developer, I can now see, okay, here are the errors. There's a recommendation error with this specific journey. Here are the different things that they clicked on and the errors that happened, whether it's network or status. Now, since this is a direct-to-consumer app, it's not like I have 10 important customers. If I did, I could look at their journey and I could reach out and be like, hey, massive Dutch company, I don't know, Philips, thank you for using us, and we're sorry you experienced this. But for me, I have thousands of users. It's not really feasible. So instead, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to go try and fix this as quickly as possible. I see my checkouts failing. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to switch from these metrics to my traces. And these are my distributed traces across all the different services I'm using. So if I open this up, again, now we're seeing specifically resources with that name, so people trying to check out, people who got a 500 status code or a 504, something like that. So every one of these is someone who tried to check out on my front end and failed. And the biggest challenge here for your developers, if I look at this one request, and if you're a developer, you kind of probably recognize the flame graph, but for the rest of us, this is the challenge with diagnosing a problem. Someone tried to check my web store and check out. That relies on an ad server. It relies on an authentication service. It relies on a payment service. It relies on a product recommendation service. It relies on a Mongo database just for that web store. Any one of these and their dependent services could be failing. So figuring out where is unbelievably hard. And also starting with logs is kind of hard. Because all of these services are developing logs. Even if you have a central logging solution, there's still millions of them. But with Datadog, we can say, okay, first of all, I have my APM errors. So I can see, I'm sorry if this is a little bit small, but I can see for the different services what the APM errors are that are being reported. Maybe I want to look at the infrastructure. So what is the CPU or the memory or the load of what this is running on? And this is a host, but what if it could be running in a container? Maybe I want to see, hey, this is running on a Kubernetes pod. Go and show me that specific pod. Show me the pod YAML. Maybe it's a taints and tolerations issue. I think if any of us have worked with Kubernetes, we know that going and using kubectl is one of the most annoying parts of dealing with this. Go and see all of the information here. See the logs for this specific pod. Show me the metrics, the processes. Maybe it's got nothing to do with Kubernetes. Maybe it's a network issue. Maybe it's about the flow of data between WebStore and these other services. A firewall or a switch has gone down. Maybe it's to do with the live processes. Maybe there's a process that's running on this host that's hogging all of the CPU or is blocking the other threads. Maybe it's a code hotspot issue. Maybe some kind of, we don't have ones for this one, but when we profile things, maybe some developer put a sleep or a wait and didn't ask us. And I would say maybe it's runtime metrics. In this case, we're looking at Ruby. So maybe we want to see what our malloc or our heap size is, or the service metrics where there's the latency and the errors. And perhaps most critically, to the point with Mendix, show me the logs. And not just the logs that happened at the same time as this, not kind of logs from this service. It is for this specific trace. Since we have one agent pulling the traces and we have one agent pulling the logs, we can stamp those logs and say, okay, for this trace ID, show me the logs that I picked up. and I'm only looking at 20. So then doing root cause analysis with this number of logs becomes easy because, you know, check payment service unavailable, that doesn't help. Payment service unavailable, that doesn't help. Payment rejected because the number of API calls per minute exceeded 1,000. So this is where, at least for this request, I haven't done total root cause, but for this request, I can see that it failed because of some API relationship I have with Adyen or PayPal or whoever it might be. And because I'm able to look at this in context of the trace, I started with the metrics told me what was happening, the traces told me where, and then the logs tell me why. Now I have the context to be able to back up. Now I can say, okay, let's get rid of the trace. Let's look at all of my logs for the past 4 hours. And this right there is the issue with that. This is not even a real production system with customers. It's just our demo system. 277 million logs in the last 4 hours. If you start there, it's very difficult to figure out what's going wrong. But now that we have some kind of context, I can say, all right, look, I know it's going to be in the web store logs, so I'll click that. I don't need any kind of a query language. I know they're going to be error logs, so I'll click that. Now I'm down to 1.46 million. Great. So maybe then I'll do a little bit of pattern recognition and say, okay, just group similar logs together. And so of those 1.4 million, 0.4 million are error sending SMS notification or error sending fax notification. That's just garbage. Clearly, the fact that I'm not able to fax things is not what's bringing down this system. I can go ahead and ignore those. But if I come down, I can see that this API call error right here, the one I just saw, the payment rejected for transaction, this has happened 92,000 times in the last 4 hours. And if I open it up, I can actually say of those 92,000, if I graph it out, it's peaking at the second half of each hour, 4:30 to 5, 5:30 to 6, 6:30 to 7. And if I look at my original checkout failures, I mean, I probably still need to figure out what this massive spike right here is. But besides those, at least these lumps, 4:30 to 5, 5:30 to 6, 6:30 to 7, those humps that are happening in failure checkouts, I've done at this point, I can confidently say, root cause analysis. This is what's driving that. And I can do two things. One, someone needs to get on the phone with Adyen and increase our API limit. We're not DDoSing them. This is just how much traffic we have. And they need to increase our limits because we lose money. That's the first obvious thing. And the second one is, I mean, we all know DevOps, incidents aren't really a bad thing. They're an opportunity to become more robust, to get better at what we do. So I'm going to create a monitor. And you can create a monitor off any data in Datadog. You can do logs, metrics, APM, anomaly monitor, forecast monitor, whatever. This is a log one. And I'm going to say, hey, if this ever goes above 1,000 in a 5-minute window, actually, let's keep it even tighter, 800. If this happens again, I want to be told. So I'm going to say, we need to increase API limit. And then this alert can go out to a specific email. So I can send it to myself. I can send out a Slack. I can create a Slack channel for the incident or ping specific Slack people. I can do pager duty. I can do ServiceNow. I can do Ops Genie. I can do literally anything. Even if we don't support it, you can do webhooks. So you can figure out how to get this into whatever notification or paging system that you need, and you can create an incident off it if you want to. So basically now I've created this, I can create this monitor, and it will continue to alert. And that's kind of the Datadog vision of how do we pull all of this data together. You have the 3 pillars. You have your metrics, your traces, and your logs. You're monitoring the front end because that's when you wake people up. And then you're layering in all this extra information. We haven't even gone into our CI/CD or the security side of things. We've just looked at this part. And already it's a huge kind of amount, an undertaking or something like that. Now, the first question everybody always asks me after I show this is, that sounds great. How easy is it to set this up? And the answer, I think, for a lot of people would probably be, oh, it's probably super hard. I can't imagine that it's that easy for us to get advantage to this. This is actually, making it easy is the biggest goal of Datadog, because to be honest, you guys can build this yourselves. A lot of customers do build this themselves. They work in open source. They put these tools together. They're able to get the observability. You shouldn't change just because Datadog will do it for you. It's about value. It's about saying, how much time are we spending building and maintaining our monitoring? Are our developers spending 50% of their time being like, oh crap, Redis updated and now we need to go and update our entire system, or Kubernetes just scaled, we need to go in and edit our Prometheus, or Grafana, we now have 1,000 dashboards and we have no idea what any of them do. Somebody needs to go re-architect them. That's the key. If we can make it as easy as possible for you, that's what our selling point is. It's not the unique value, it's the fact that we can do it more easily and we can tie all this together so you can focus on the top of that pyramid. So just to give you a quick example, because I was at the AWS Summit today. If we were to go to our integrations, at this point we have over 600 Datadog managed integrations. So every single one of these is by us. And it goes from everything as modern as AWS and the Lambda functions and Lambda tracing to this is our IBM suite that we monitor. So there's a huge range of what we can pull data from. And for every one of these integrations, you can say, okay, let's say, I mean, Redis is always a good example. Let's say I'm interested in Redis. We will say, okay, here is how you set Redis up. It's basically these two parameters in our YAML file. Here is the data that we will collect. There's 76 different metrics. And here are the out-of-the-box assets we give you. So if you're new to Redis, we give you this Redis dashboard. And like, for instance, for me, I have never worked with Redis. If I had to set up a Redis data, actually did. I forked a Kubernetes app because I wanted to be able to test it. And it had Redis in it. And it was cool to me to be able to say, okay, max memory reached. This is a metric that Redis provides. But I didn't know that if you reach max memory, it doesn't, I just assumed it would shut down. It doesn't. It means that that's when it starts reading and writing from disk. And as we all know, when you start using disk as your RAM, it's 10,000 to 100,000 times slower. This is why it's important to monitor this. Redis has a specific fragmentation and cache hit metric. But what is normal? Like, if you get to 180% in terms of your fragmentation ratio, you should restart. Because that means that the memory needs to be unallocated and kind of re-pushed together, and it needs to be able to defragment what I would have no idea that that was the number. And it doesn't make sense to trust our developers to know all these numbers for all the technologies they're using. It's not their job. Their job is to build software. So whether it's Mendix or whether it's Datadog or whatever solution you're using, as your technologies get more and more complicated and we get an architecture that looks more and more like this, with dozens and dozens of interconnecting systems, and all of them have metrics and traces and logs and data, having a solid strategy as to, okay, how are we going to pull this data together? What is going to be the source of truth? When are we going to wake up our on-call engineers, and how are we going to deal with incidents as they come up? That becomes super important. Questions?
Could you show us how you can monitor Mendix in this?
Unfortunately not, because our demo system is not fake data. It all runs against actual systems, and we don't have a Mendix system running. Okay. Now, Jeroen is able to actually do this. He's done this in the past. We weren't able to for this demo, but there's a potential we can show like screenshots of what that looks like. But I will say, especially when it comes to logs, it doesn't really make a difference to us. Whether it's our agent tailing a log file, Mendix forwarding it to us, you sending it directly to our API, the process is the exact same. Where we're able to say, okay, the logs come in, we process those logs, we do standard attributes. This allows you to rename things. So to Jeroen's point, if one team is calling it HTTP stat.status and another team is HTTP_status, this is where you can have a standard naming convention. We can scan for things that maybe Mendix missed, so IP addresses, email addresses, credit card numbers, anything like that, and we can pull them out of the logs. We do error tracking and anomaly detection. And then basically, you get access to all of your logs in the live tail. And then you choose which logs you want to keep and for how long. So if you send Mendix logs, however, to Datadog, they will be available kind of in your log analytics, where it's all of these logs here. And then for any log, which is typically we get them in JSON format, but we can also grok, parse, or whatever. Every single one of these, we have the tags, first of all. Like, for instance, this log coming from Google has over 70 different tags, just based on the fact that the host knows where it's sitting and what cloud provider it's working. But then any of these attributes that are in the log can be used to query. So we have customer ID, merchant ID, we have device information, we have the headers from the log as it came in. We have just general status code. So anything that Mendix or you choose with your Mendix logger to include in the log can then be filtered here. So a good practice would probably be to log team or owner or service or application. Because then that allows, when something goes wrong, it becomes easy for you to say, oh, search for team A. Is it their logs that have the errors? Is it team B? Is it service A? But all of those are able to be kind of just added as facets on the left and filtered on. I will say, though, good point. We were planning on doing the live Mendix demo for this one. And with the AWS Summit, plus the fact that Jeroen is a new father, some other things kind of got in the way there. Not got in the way. Some beautiful miracles took precedent, let's say. All right, any other questions, guys? So my last plug for Datadog. You can sign up for a free trial without asking, if you just go to Datadog, free trial, you can sign up for it right here. And you get 2 weeks. We put no limits on the functionality, so you can use the entire product, and we don't charge you. So within 2 weeks, if you're ready to set up and start adding cloud things, you can start to build a use case and figure out, would this bring me value? We are open source. In fact, a lot of our competitors, when they come out with technologies, they just fork our agent as it is. In fact, OpenTelemetry uses Datadog's intellectual property. So if you have any questions about how the agent works, or you want to fork it for your own agent tools, go for it. Datadog, agent, GitHub. It's all right there. And you can see kind of all the different capabilities, what libraries we're using, how we pull this stuff out. Now, the UI is not open source, but at least the agent is, so how we collect that data is. So you can go and check that out there. And finally, our documentation is really, really helpful. So if you decide that you want to do something like Datadog on Kubernetes, and you can skip all the, I feel like Google has added a lot more sponsored links recently. Maybe that's just me, but if you scroll down to the actual relevant one, we will give you blog posts about how we do it, because we monitor Datadog with Datadog. So we get our SRE teams and our DevOps teams to write best practice guides. And then we give you documentation on, okay, you want to install on Kubernetes? Are you using Operator? Are you using Helm? If you're using Helm, here's how you set it up, and we'll walk you through all of the process. This is the same for all of our products. Same for logs, same for metrics, same for APM, same for run. So all the information is out there, and if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. Owen Phelan is the name. We have a public Slack channel, which is a huge community. We have at least 10,000 people on there now, where you can also ask questions, and you can find me there as well. So that is it for me. It's the end of mine one. Guys, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
And there was already a question about, can you show us Mendix data? And it's correct, as you mentioned, we don't have the live demo with Mendix. But I do have some scenarios in which Datadog in particular, but to be honest, it could be another tool. But I noticed, is it working again? It's at least trying. The first time I encountered Datadog was, I think, 5 years ago in a media company. So we were using multiple Mendix applications in a private cloud, and it was really, really, really straightforward to have something else in place than just going into your Kubernetes and getting your logs out. So there, the traceability, it was there, it was needed, it was very clear. But later on, I noticed that also in monoliths, also in smaller apps, you can do really powerful things with just your logs. And did you notice the set metric action in your Studio Pro IDE? It's there, it's set metric, Gauk, and some other ones. They are all tied into this protocol. So whatever tool you're using, it's streaming those metrics to that tool, so you can use them. So especially of course, the demo included a lot of data. I think most of our Mendix application, not to make them smaller than they are, but they include fewer data. But let's see. That's not working. Yeah. So let's round it up by just showing you real quick, because we started a bit later and I will do this fast, is how to glue this all together. The Datadog setup, we all saw the image from Owen. For the Mendix implementation, you mainly need the API key and the place where so the site. So for us, mostly that will be EU. Then you can set your runtime environment variables. You need to set at least 2. So that's the Datadog API key and the Datadog site. This is all very well documented in the Mendix documentation for all the 4 APM tools, to be precise, but for Datadog as well. And then you can start already building your own dashboards. And I did it for a few customers now, and I think now it takes maybe 3 hours to set it up and have it running and have a dashboard, something like this. So just by counting log messages. So for this, it's really simple. I'm counting the infos and the warnings, but you can also do something with your Mendix log nodes. You can just parse your Mendix log nodes to Datadog in this case. I'm also looking at the response time, so the average response time. It's also showing in Sprinter, but it's easy to aggregate both your logs. So, there are more errors and my average response time is increasing. That's relevant. That's something you get out of a tool like this. There's also a plugin available. It's really, 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 really fresh. It's like April. So then you have a Mendix deploy dashboard out of the box. Not able to try it myself, but it's there. And then logging. And then I will hint just some worthy examples in which it helped us a lot. In this GIF, you see an actual Mendix application, and I notice I'm really showing the logs here, and it's not as detailed as the demonstration because we just have fewer data available in this application. But if you know what could be done, then you might tend to add more logs as well. So just the examples, and to not forget one. Users rarely report minor issues, especially in consumer-focused application. I often see that there are always errors in the log. And then the senior employee of the company says, well, yeah, they are there for ages now, so I don't think that is really bothering us. And you hear that a lot. But still, there are things going wrong. The phone number is really something I noticed, I think, half a year ago at a customer. Some people were trying really strange phone numbers from wherever they came from. And it was just not working. And they didn't know that, and it was going wrong for 4 years, I think. So that's insane that you don't know that you don't see that. And having all the data together can help you there. Then the hidden issue, and that's where the GIF is about. We noticed that there was a spike, and you can see it here as well. So this is an actually production system. I blurred out all the relevant things there. But you can see that there was a spike in errors. But the app was functioning. No one was complaining. Everything was working. So what was the catch? We were hitting a rate limit. So we were having a rate limit of 1,000, and we were hitting that somewhere around the end of the day. So whenever that 24-hour period of time was gone. No one noticed because we have an exponential backoff, so everything is just working. If something went wrong, I just tried 2 more days, and then finally it worked. But still, it's something you want to know and you want to tackle. So this is real, just Mendix data within the environment. Then another one. The overall overview in a multi-app landscape. I just skip it now because it's really about those traces. So have a trace in your entire landscape and see what's happening there. We can do that too. You just need to do it. And of course, improve developer productivity. You saw me downloading those text files and that Control F and that counting and stuff like that. It's really easy to just drag and drop. Give me everything from last day. Give me everything from last week. Where are my trends? What's happening? It's, yeah. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to use that. Just scroll down. And the helpful tags, and that's also a very Mendix specific one. The Mendix platform is already adding a lot of tags, and one of them is, for example, the version number. So the version number of the actual log message of your application. And that really helped us to see when a bug was introduced into production. You don't want that, but it happens. And then you can see actually this log message, from which release was it added to my pile of log nodes. And that's something you could do that with the text files from Mendix, but then you were having a hard job. So that's one I wanted to point out as well. And then performance. Adding such powerful insights, etc. You can build that on your own, of course. You can add it in your Mendix application, of course. But having an understanding, especially in a larger landscape, where do I put such a thing? Will I build a logging app on its own just to track process? I've seen that before. Will I put it in the main application? It's bulky already. It's on a XL cloud slot somewhere. And it's costing me a lot of money already, so put more data in there. I don't feel like it. It's put it somewhere else. Put it somewhere where people can access it and have a better look at it. So therefore, I would like to round it up. Otherwise, we won't be home before it's dark. Before I stop, I really want to thank just a few people, and a lot of people were helping making this happen. Especially you were welcomed downstairs, most of us. And of course, we have Marek here with the camera. So hopefully people at home, they also heard what we wanted to share. Then Barbara also did an awful lot to make this all happen, that we were even allowed to have this place. So really thanks for that. And of course our guest speaker, Owen. So I want to combine the applause for all the people who helped us.